Hey. So before we get started, I have to ask, how'd you get such a great beard? It's wonderful. How long has it been?
Well, it's funny. The beard, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school in Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah, okay. All-boys Catholic high schools. And you couldn't grow any facial hair. I would actually get detention for facial hair. So the second I was done that summer, when I was 18, I pretty much started growing the beard.
You already won some fans with that.
So,
great.
Yeah. So
okay.
Good.
Wow.
So yeah, I've had the beard ever since, and it was actually quite larger about 2 weeks ago. I had to trim it for a job interview I had. So, so you probably couldn't even see my mouth.
But you kept it. You kept it. You didn't.
I kept it decent for
great.
the time being.
So you went to WUNC Greensboro first as a history major. How'd you get involved in the radio station?
Well, I always knew I wanted to, when I went to college, knowing that I was going to college, I knew that I wanted to work in college radio. Like, I grew up listening to independent music since the age of 15, really, going to shows at an early age, knowing that I wanted to be involved with that. So came to University of North Carolina at Greensboro, started as a history major, took a film class, changed my major right away to media studies, and got involved with the radio station my freshman year, and was involved ever since.
And so you were there as a student, and then you were also on as a staff afterwards? What?
Yeah, basically the way it runs is all the student DJs are volunteers. You do 2 or 3 hour radio shows, and then to be on the executive board as it is, there's a 6-member executive board. You have a music director, program director, promotions, production, sports, news, and I became the music director in my senior year. And then after that, really my senior year, we had a really strong board, and it was really one of the first times in a couple years that the station was really strong and the university started to take notice. And they wanted the station to be more active and more involved. There's always the complaint with college radio that students don't know it exists even. And so sort of as a way to get that to happen, to make the station stronger and have the station be the voice of the campus, we convinced them to hire a full-time person, to have a person there year after year for continuity, to make sure the station was known by students and the community. So they went ahead and offered the job, and I was lucky enough to get it pretty much 4 months after I got my undergrad.
Right on.
So I went right into that, became the full-time GM in 2003.
What are some of the initiatives you did at WUAG to get people involved? I know you said there was a concert series of some kind.
Yeah, well, basically, you've got to be active. You can't just, run your programming and, be the typical college DJ where you're just saying, and just playing music. You got to have events. You got to have interactive things with other organizations on campus. So basically, we did a lot of collaborations with such things as the theater department. We got the theater department involved. We would have scenes from upcoming plays read on the air. We would give away tickets for upcoming theater shows. We got involved with the creative writing department on campus. We had people come in and read poems or short stories. Then as far as the concert series you talk about, it was called the WUAG Presents concert series. And basically what we did is we got the budget, got the university, convinced them to give us the money to basically bring a national touring band that we played on the station once a month to an area venue in town. And we would also have a local band or 2 open up. That was a really big highlight for us. We had a lot of people coming out. Concerts average really for Greensboro, which is pretty decent, was around 150 people on a weekday night. So the concerts, became our trademark, really. Yeah.
Just so anyone knows, if you have any questions for Jack, you can feel free to tweet them right now. Roosevelt will be answering them. We'll be doing that until throughout the forum. So one of the things you mentioned when we spoke was the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And like a good student, I tried to Wikipedia it, and it was just a little confusing. I was wondering how did it change the world of radio?
Yeah, dramatically. Has anyone in here ever heard the 96 Telecommunications Act? If there's media studies students in here, you should at least be taught about it. It's an act that actually was, President Clinton signed it in 96. It was good because it actually is what made the internet more available to everyone. And it really sort of let the freedom of the internet take over, which is great. But there was Section 205 of the 96 Telecommunications Act that kind of was hidden in there. And it was really what it was deregulation of radio. It was sort of open the floodgates of ownership of radio. Before pre-96 Telecommunications Act, the amount of stations one company could own in a single market was 2. So you had actually a lot of small companies, a lot of even mom and pop companies that owned radio stations prior to 96. And after 96, that was deregulated and opened up to, and depending on the market size, you could own up to 8 stations in one market. But it's smaller markets is where you really saw the impact. So say you have a market that has 15 or fewer stations. One company could own 3 stations in that market. And if they own the 3 biggest stations, then really what happens is you have one company projecting, their business model out on the radio, and you don't have diverse points of view. You've got a lot of homogeny that you're hearing the same things everywhere. I mean, I'm sure all of us experience it on commercial radio. Obviously, the biggest sort of bad guy on the block of this is Clear Channel Communications. But prior to the 96 Act, they spread out the wealth, and they had about 45 stations. At their peak, Clear Channel owned 1,200 stations across the country. So they could dominate pretty much every market they wanted to, and they did, and they still do.
So we hear a lot about internet radio and a lot of internet services taking the place of the community aspect of radio. Do you think the internet is going to replace the radio, or will it ever completely replace it effectively?
Right. I'm pretty old school when it comes to this, thinking of the power of radio. I really sort of romanticize radio, and I think it is a pretty wild thing to think about. You have this one point where you're basically communicating to the masses, with a single microphone. I think that's pretty cool. Just by a show of hands, who here listens to actual radio, like terrestrial radio in your car? See, it's still pretty significant. And now, show of hands, who listens to internet radio? Okay. You can see that, especially with the younger audience, that it's definitely half and half. And I think that terrestrial radio, the radio, again, that you hear in your car, and if radio didn't exist in the car, I think it would be dead. That is definitely the number one place that a lot of people listen to the radio. And I think that internet radio, we talked about this, how I think internet radio is very isolated. You don't get the community aspect of listening to the radio together when you're just listening to the internet radio. But I think the internet radio has been great because it's given a lot of diverse point of views coming out, a lot of diverse programming coming out. Because when you have the commercial radio where they're just, again, playing the same songs, same 5 songs, for several months at a time, then, people get turned off by that. They want to be exposed to new music. That's what radio was originally about, exposing people to new music. So I see internet radio doing that, definitely. One thing that I don't think is going to be taking off, and they've seen this, especially with the state of the economy, is satellite radio. Who here has satellite radio? Yeah. Satellite radio basically is like cable television. You have to pay for it. And we've all been grown up with radio being free, so I don't think they're going to see anytime soon satellite radio. That was when satellite radio first came out. They said, "Uh-oh, radio's in trouble. Satellite radio's going to take it over." I don't see that happening. But an internet radio, I think, again, it's good that it's great. I mean, it's got the options out there and the diverse options out there that you can't get on.
What do you see changing in community and collegiate radio? What are some of the changes you've seen going on?
I would say actually, a lot more participation in it. When I first started, it was sort of more like a small clique club type thing where there was only a few. We weren't 24 hours live DJs. Mm-hmm. Pretty much my last couple years there as GM, we had 24 hours of live DJs because it was so popular. Getting students excited about it, I think, is a lot easier to do these days because of the main thing you get out of it is the exposure to new music. And I've met some of the best friends I've ever had from college radio, so I think it's a lot easier to sell these days. And I think that is happening for a number of reasons, mainly because I think, again, people are getting fed up with the same crap over and over.
And we briefly spoke of the things going on at Vanderbilt, going on at Rice, some of these other changes. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, that, I say the popularity of it is growing. There is unfortunately a very negative trend that has just occurred in the last year that a lot of people don't know about, and I think the response that I'll talk about also shows you that students are not backing down from college radio. Unfortunately, four private universities have recently sold their stations to NPR affiliate classical stations. These markets didn't have a classical station. The universities, are obviously in tough economic times as well, and they see a quick out is selling a radio station for a couple $1 million. It's happened to Rice University, University of San Francisco, and then most recently Vanderbilt University, which that one was probably the most disheartening when that happened, in that basically the administration announced back last September that they were considering it, and there was a huge uproar. The station had been around for 60 years, both from the students and the community listeners. They said, hey, we want our college radio. We don't want it to disappear. And they started a campaign, a web campaign. They had testimonials from people like Chuck D and She and Him, and people that were, adamantly against it. And unfortunately, this past May, basically when school ended, they went ahead and sold the station. Mm-hmm. And now they're only an online station only. In all these cases, that is the one thing the university has kept the station online. So there's that, but there's nothing like, again, hearing it driving around your car. Yeah. So a response of this was the first ever National College Radio Day occurred this past October. It's kind of surprising that it's taken this long for something like that to develop, but I think it basically did develop out of a response to, hey, don't do this stuff behind the students' back. Don't try to sell the college radio because there's a large desire for it to continue. And so college radio started, it was a nationwide thing, basically on that day. I think it was October 12th this past year. Stations, there was about a 20-minute documentary that was created by this. It was started by this one station in New Jersey. They decided to start this whole campaign, and they got over 500 stations, college radio stations, to get behind it. I think next year, they've already announced the one for next year, cool. So they're already preparing for it. And again, it's basically saying, hey, don't take our college radio away. And this is college radio's here, and this is why it should be here to stay.
Jack was part of a 3-part interview series, and we'll have that up on our website, getinformed.net, as well as the actual website for Safe College Radio. So you'll be able to find that later. You say that these sort of stations can be the voice of the community. What exactly does that mean, or what's your experience with that?
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, one thing that WUAG did ever since I started there was we have an hourly concert update. You announce what concerts are happening in the area so people know what shows are happening. We also did PSAs, public service announcements we tried to make them all local. Local organizations that were benefiting the community, local nonprofits. Being majority of your college radio stations are non-commercial nonprofit stations. They're mostly funded by student activity fees. They do some fundraising and underwriting, but for the most part, they're funded pretty well by the universities. And it's not even that expensive for the universities to run these stations, too. That's why it's kind of, it was preposterous that they were selling these stations, although they were making a few $1 million. But as far as annually, you can run a college station for, $25,000. But when the question, go back to the question of community, yeah, without a doubt, you're not going to find out about, a local band playing by listening to commercial radio. You're going to find out about the big concerts that these commercial stations are sponsoring, but you're not going to hear about, every concert that's happening. And basically, that's what college radio should be and is a platform to hear that stuff, medium to hear what's going on in the community. We also had several community talk shows that we started related to what was happening on campus and off campus. And those were they always brought in people. Another thing I definitely should mention that we did, which is I believe that Crescent City Radio does, is live in-studio performances. We did a weekly live in-studio show called Radio Greensboro, where basically it was a local band. Every Sunday night would come in, they'd be interviewed. They would play, a 30 to 45-minute set on the air live. It was great experience for our production team because it was mixed live. And it was a great chance for them to get interviewing skills down. And then, of course, for the bands, it's a tremendous exposure. And that relationship, creating that relationship with bands, you're inevitably going to get listeners. And then, of course, they're going to tell their friends, hey, we're on WUAG. You're going to get listeners through that. So it's just it's a nonstop cycle. And something also we did with that I just want to mention is we also put out CD compilations of in-studio performances. I don't think I mentioned that to you. We actually released 5 CD compilations of not only local but national acts. We had several national acts. Our location in Greensboro is called the Gate City, actually, because it's a gate city to the east and west of North Carolina. It's a lot of interstates cross through at 40 and 85, so it was easy to get bands to come through on their way playing somewhere else in D.C., Charlotte, Atlanta. That was an inevitable sort of connection to the community as well. That with local bands.
One of the responsibilities you had at the radio station was to sort of keep track on some labels. You like to follow some labels. What are some of the labels you're most excited about now? Are there smaller labels doing stuff that?
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. And I think the influx of new labels has increased dramatically because of making it so easy to put things online. But there's definitely some ones that are doing some things that are very creative, and I talked about this with you and with you. Third Man Records, pretty cool what they're doing. Jack White's label, basically coming out with really exclusive specialty releases that, especially if in the world of vinyl, they'll come out with records that are painted different colors and limited releases. They have this traveling van that goes around the area festivals. I heard it was at the Voodoo Festival here. Where basically you can come into this van and you can listen to records, you can see what the latest things that they have for sale, what they're doing. That's definitely a label that I think is, and if you have someone like Jack White behind it, obviously you've got a huge push. But it was created by Jack White because he knows what the industry's like, and he knows that to be different, you've got to have a label that is doing something different. And when you have to control the label, possibilities are endless, which is something you also see, which is really cool with labels. Another label, Merge Records, out of Chapel Hill, out of Durham, North Carolina. They were started by band Superchunk. The main guy and girl from Superchunk went ahead and started the label because they wanted to have complete control, really DIY, of their releases, and eventually started to sign area bands, and now Merge Records is definitely, I would say, probably the biggest success story of an independent label that I know of, most notably because they have the Arcade Fire on their label, and Arcade Fire just won the Best Grammy of the Year, beating out Justin Bieber, which
it's about
shocked
time.
people. Yeah, right.
Nice.
So, those two labels I would say in particular. There's a lot more out there. I could go on and on, but those two, I think, as far as successful independent labels, I would highlight those two.
And there's a project you're involved with back in Greensboro that you're some sort of like a music, I don't want to say music co-op, but your friend has a space. What's this project about?
Yes, that's actually sort of developed in the last couple of weeks. I'm a big vinyl junkie. I've been collecting records since I was 16 years old. Really, I have a lot of stuff that I have doubles of and that I'd like to sell. And so this guy has a space, an event space, where he has shows, and also he rents out the space for local dance performers that want to rent out photographers. But he wants to have it open during the day, so I said, hey, why don't you, I've always thought something cool would be a record co-op, where you simply have area vendors, guys that sell records on eBay and go to record fairs. I go to record fairs all the time. Basically convinced a couple guys that we're going to just have our records there for sale, and a percentage will go back to the space. And in exchange for having your records on sale, you volunteer there for a couple hours a week. And really, we're trying to create more of a, not your typical snobby record store. We're trying to create an atmosphere where we want to, you're going to have record players there. You can listen to any record at all that we have in the store, which is something I think record stores need to have now. I think that is sort of going to be a place to expose people to new music, because that's the goal. That's always my goal.
What do you make of the recent popularity of vinyl? I mean, where do you think spurred it? It's sort of been in its resurgence for a couple of years now. Where do you think?
Another show of hands. Who here collects records? Yeah.
Well, we're really cool.
You guys are really cool. You guys are very
like
cool.
Most, this whole school
sort of
is
preaching to the choir, I guess. Without a doubt, the resurgence of it has taken off dramatically within the last 5 years, and I think it's because what really helped out with that, without a doubt, is piracy and the ability to get free music so easily. Records, there's a lot more of an ownership to records when you buy a record compared to a CD. A CD, we all know that CDs are really just, not even worth a penny anymore. So a lot of these labels, what you're seeing, are releasing vinyl-only releases, and they have a download inside, so you can download it to do whatever you want with it. Put it on your iPod, put it on a CD, whatever you want, which I think is definitely the way to go. There's everything from the tangible aspect to, obviously, it looks cooler, to the fact that it sounds better. I mean, that's something I've talked recently about at High Point University in their communications department, and they sort of have a music industry portion of that, and where, unfortunately, the younger generation is not even learning how to listen to music correctly anymore, because you have the condensed digital versions, which don't sound anywhere near as good as they do on vinyl. And so once you experience that, you almost don't even turn back. So
isn't that sort of a loaded phrase, though, listen to music correctly?
It is a loaded phrase, yeah. I guess sort of the listening experience, and I guess this is something you guys, I'm sure, talk about a lot. You have everything from, basically digital versus analog, which is, a huge argument, but really analog is the basics, that's the roots, and that's the essence where it sounds a lot better than digital, right, in my opinion. Right. And I think by show of hands, it looks like you guys are seeing that as well.
So you taught for you weren't just a GM. You also taught at UNCG, and you taught a class called Radio and Media Culture. Could you tell us what's a synopsis of that?
Well, basically, the department had a radio minor. And really the only classes were, there was a practicum class that basically you would work at the radio station, get involved with one of the departments, and then there was like an announcing class, a sports broadcasting class, but there was no classes really about radio. And they asked me to come up with a class pretty much about the history of radio, which is pretty fascinating stuff. It's actually, I am kind of a history buff. Again, I originally went as a history major, but the history of radio really reflects what is happening in this country, really. And does anybody know how old radio is, for instance?
Zach?
I guess. Radio, the first radio as we know it, not Morse code radio, which did exist in the late 1800s. First transmission of human voice occurred on Christmas Eve, 1906, actually. Wow. So it's a little over 100 years old, radio is. And it's experienced dramatic changes, without a doubt. And really, the goal of the class was to, again, break down the way radios run from the way it was, and there's several golden ages of radio, but without a doubt, the one golden age with that is the 1950s, when radio really had to respond to television. When television first came out, people thought radio was dead. Television was radio with pictures. And radio had to redefine itself, and how did it do that? It did that through music. This is the golden age of the music industry, of putting out 45 singles, and to hear the latest single, you had to listen to the radio. Your local DJ was really actually somebody that probably lived in your community. Local businesses would advertise on radio because it was too expensive to advertise on television. So that's really kind of a throwback, or kind of what I think college radio is trying to do, and community radio is doing, like stations like WUAG here, being that voice for exposing the audience to new music and not, selling out to, the corporate needs of what happens, unfortunately, in commercial radio, which they have to do, I understand that. So anyway, another part of the class was we would bring in the part of the culture class. There's a lot of interesting subcultures that exist in radio. There's ham radio, which ham radio is really another thing that's been around for over 100 years.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, ham radio, a lot of people don't know what it is, but basically it's amateur radio at its core roots, where it's in a lot of ways, the way I describe it to people or compare it is sort of CBing, and where a lot of times you'll find there's clubs all across the country of guys and girls that pretty much in their basements have these radio communications systems that they set up by themselves, very DIY, very bare bones, and you can communicate with other ham enthusiasts all across the world. I would bring in these ham radio clubs, and they would bring in their equipment, and they would communicate with people in Japan, people in Africa, in Europe, pretty much everywhere you can imagine. It was pretty wild, and the students were really fascinated by it, and it's something that people don't know exists, but it does exist. Also, we talked about pirate radio. Pirate radio is very sort of bare bones also, all about getting your voice out there, freedom of expression. That's a lot of what radio is about. And then, of course, we took a tour of a commercial station so they could see what that was like. And when I say a commercial station, it was this company called Entercom that owns 6 stations, all housed in one building. And that was, I think, the students, kind of eye-opening for the students, because a lot of people think of radio and they think of these big, large rooms. When you go to some of these consolidated stations, what you find is these really small rooms, not too friendly. The largest room in these buildings is the advertising room where they're selling ads. So they got to see that. And then we also brought in NPR affiliates so they could talk about that as well. Mm-hmm. So just kind of a whole, review of where radio's been and where it's going. We also talk a lot about that, the future of it.
I have one more question to ask you before we go into student questions. Mm-hmm. And I invite students, if you have any, please go ahead and make your way to the microphones now. How does one know if smaller community radio is right for them? I mean, what from your experience, what would you think is a good guiding light? Or if someone has the traits?
Yeah. Who here is in Crescent Radio? Show of hands for that too. Great. Awesome. There's no reason you shouldn't get involved with college radio. This is the spiel I always do. So you go to college to experiment with things. Well, there's a lot of things you can experiment with that are not good for you health-wise. College radio is not going to hurt you. There's nothing that's going to hurt you with college radio. If anything, it's going to benefit you in so many ways. It's a great thing to put on your resume. The number one thing is going to expose you to new music. Another thing, as I mentioned already, is the friendships you're going to make. You're going to make, because you're basically doing something with like-minded people. And so I'm a huge advocate of getting involved with it. The rewards are endless, really. And the connections I've made through it have been dramatic. Even we were talking earlier, one of our DJs, she actually lived in New Orleans, and I visited. That was the first time I was able to visit 2 years ago, and I was able to stay with her. There's people all across the country that I've met through college radio that has benefited me tremendously. So.
Right on. Any questions?
Can't hurt.
Yeah.
Hey, my name's Kevin. I was just wondering, when y'all did your broadcast, if y'all had much control over what y'all were doing, or if there was some sort of administrative oversight from teachers, and if y'all had any sort of relations with government agencies trying to tell y'all what to do.
Right. No, that's kind of the beauty of, well, it depends. I mean, it's a case-by-case basis. For us, essentially when they gave the general manager job, that was kind of putting sort of me in charge of the programming and what was going on in the air. The students really should always be in charge of the programming. Most stations, what you'll find is there's a faculty advisor that sort of oversees what the station's doing, and then the rest is completely student-run. You usually have a program director, a student that hires and trains the DJs. Essentially, all the stations have their programming already set. Most of the stations have a rotation of the new music. The way you get your rotation is through CMJ. CMJ stands for College Music Journal. It's basically the billboard of college radio. It's been around for over 25 years. It's basically the source for labels to get their music out there. If you're not a member of CMJ, you're not going to get music. That's the other thing you get free music. You don't pay for the music. If you pay to be a member of CMJ, which is nothing. And once you're a member of CMJ, you're going to receive music from labels, from artists directly, from distributors. So really, ultimately, the programming is control of the students. And then as far as government agencies, FCC, obviously you're an FCC licensed station, so you've got to follow FCC rules. You got to make sure you're following all the license renewal timelines. Online stations, broadcasting your signal online is also something you got to legally do. You have to legally do that with the government as well. That's actually been sort of a developing thing. 5 years ago, that didn't exist, but about 5 years ago is when they started it, realizing that pretty much all stations now broadcast online as well. So yeah, it's pretty wide open.
Great question, Kevin. Any other questions?
Hi, I was wondering, where do you really see radio in 5 years? Do you think it's still going to be as relevant, or do you think it's kind of going downwards? Obviously, that's not what we want, but...
Yeah. I think for me personally, again, being sort of romanticizing what radio is, I think it will be here for a long time. I do think that, the industry of commercial radio has become a beast of itself, and if they don't change, just like broadcast news, which you're seeing broadcast news slowly change as well, if that doesn't happen, then commercial radio is going to be in trouble. But I do strongly believe that non-commercial radio, community radio, will be around as long as, the bigger people that hold the purses aren't cutting you off, like it's happened, unfortunately, with these other college radio stations I talked about. But I think the outcry has been strong enough that these universities are realizing they're pissing their students off, and that's not good. It's not good. So I hope that it's going to be around. I think it will be.
Thanks.
Great question.
In our lifetime.
Another question.
How's it going?
Hey.
What's your name for the people at home?
I'm Bo.
Bo, right on.
One of the things that I get told a lot when I'm telling people that I study music, and I know a lot of people that are probably like thinking about getting involved in radio or studio music, is that it's a dying industry. Did you ever encounter that either from yourself or other people when you were getting started, and did it faze you? And if so, how'd you get over it?
Yeah, no, that's definitely
From the heart. That's good.
That's definitely a sentiment you get, without a doubt. The response I have to that is, I was involved with a different kind of radio. I wasn't involved, when you say that term radio, you really do think of the crap that we hear on the commercial radio. So if you tell them you're doing something different and involved with a radio form that people want to be exposed to, they want to hear new stuff, that was always my response to that, really. And I think innovations of such things as internet radio is going to also expand it, positively for the next several years, several decades. So I don't think it's a dying industry. When it comes to commercial radio and the way it's continued to go, yes, I think that is dying, and it's needs to change. So.
Did you have a question there, Hillary?
I have a question. We have a lot of musicians and artists here, people who might not actually want to get into radio, but how could, as a musician, how could you use college radio to benefit your band?
Yeah, number one, get your music on the station. It's not that hard to do. If you try to walk into a commercial station, they're not even going to look at you. But if you walk into a college station, yeah, they're gonna talk to you most likely. You've got to be proactive. You got to keep up on it. It is college radio, so there's several college stations out there that you might send your CD and never hear anything back from them. But you've got to be the one that contacts them. Send your CD. 2 weeks later, follow up on it. Say, hey, this is my band. This is why I think you should check it out. Do it right. Also, don't just send your CD. Send it with it's kind of an old thing, but if you send it with a one sheet, which a one sheet is basically a sort of a description of your band, what you guys do, maybe who you played with, that helps. I always say, also, as music director, I would see, and as a GM, I would see our mail. Pretty much, we would get probably 50 to 60 CDs a week.
Wow.
And there's definitely ones that you open and you look at the cover and you're just like, I don't have time for this. And there's no stack. I'm not gonna lie.
There it is.
So you got to have something that makes it stick out. Something that is changing too that I will mention about that is several of the distributors have started to send their music digitally. That started about 5 years ago, and there was actually a negative response to that as well, mainly because of the sound quality. We said, hey, we don't want, give it to us on CD. We want the artwork. We want, you know, the physical copy of it. We don't want this digital copy. You know, that definitely is something that you'll find in getting in the radio industry. You'll see that a lot of it, unfortunately, has changed where it is click and drag and play, which is fine. But, you know, we still have turntables. We still have CD players. Getting back, though, to what you were saying, if you're going to send your CD, follow up on it and make it stand out. But definitely do it. It's not going to hurt.
Good question.
My name is Zach. I'm curious about how, for instance, Crescent City Radio does not have a terrestrial channel. I'm curious how much that costs, because I'm under the impression that the reason we don't have it is because it's prohibitively expensive. And so I'm wondering, how does one go about getting a channel?
Yeah, can we get channels? Can I get a channel?
It is complicated. No, it's very complicated.
Okay.
No.
All right. Okay.
For one, you've got to look at the market, and if the market is condensed if there's, you know, literally numbers gone, frequencies gone, then it's not available. Basically, what you have to do is you have to hire a frequency coordinator, and that is the person that basically does that. But you legally have to do that.
Wait, they find what's a frequency coordinator?
They find the frequency that you could be on. Basically.
Okay. All right.
And then you're going to have to get it approved by the FCC, and with that, you have to get lawyers involved. And if you get lawyers involved, yes, it's costly. But you know, if you're in the right market, I'm assuming this market's pretty crowded, so that's probably why. But if you get enough budget behind it and get good lawyers behind it, lawyers that have done FCC work, then you have a good chance. Make sure you do your research before, and again, get a budget together. It could probably end up costing you around $50,000, so it's not cheap.
You have another
a
question?
follow-up.
Okay.
I'm wondering, since it seems that that's probably not very realistic that we'll get a terrestrial channel anytime soon. I'm wondering, do you have any?
Benson,
what?
The Tom Benson
Jesuit Center?
Yeah,
was $8 million. Yeah.
Our own. Can we not? Okay, sorry.
Well, I don't know. Crudy is more. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice for promoting online college radio and making it relevant? Because I know for a fact that ours, we measure our listenership in single digits.
Right. Well, you guys have a request line, right? Okay. Do you guys have a request line? Okay, good. Well, the request line, without a doubt, is your direct connection to your listening audience. It can be disheartening when you're sitting there and the phone's not ringing. You've got to be proactive. Again, it's the word proactive. You've got to be proactive. You've got to get yourself out there. We did it again with doing the monthly shows we would do, but even the bare bones of just having a table on campus once a month in a crowded area where you're passing out stickers, passing out keychains, passing out pens. People love free stuff. When I first started, our station, without a doubt, was considered not very popular, and our goal was to change that, and I think we did through exposure of literally promotional materials. There you are. And events, without a doubt, events. And we got the local bands doing the radio shows. They were all promoting it. If you become that voice for the local bands and you become the place for people to hear new music, it's tough on being an internet station only. Very tough. We had the benefit of being both. But honestly, sometimes we get the response I don't have a radio. Well, then you come back and be like, hey, you have the internet, so here you can listen to the stream online. So just getting promotional material, really, and it might sound kind of cheesy to have pens and stickers, but that really does go a long way. Start tagging everywhere with stickers. That was something we did on campus. University wasn't too happy with it, but we kind of were hands off. We were like, hey, we're giving stickers out. Students are doing it. We're not doing it, but we were doing it. Just go ahead and just post, start putting stickers where people see it. And they're like, oh, what's that? Make yourself stand out, really.
Right. Well, if you have any other questions for Jack Bonney, he'll be doing a clinic with Jay Crudy after this with Crescent City Radio, and everyone is invited to that. So that'll be on the 4th floor, I believe, going up to 4th floor up by the studios. So if you have any more questions, feel free to talk to Jack afterwards or see him up there. Jack, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, guys.